And as you can see, our speakers, guests for the panel discussion just couldn't wait to enter this stage and talk to you. Allow me to introduce them. So basically, we're going to talk about alternative protein market, consumer acceptance, and also changing pricing dynamic. Here to talk to you about it, we have Anne-Marie Butler, Global Director of Strategy and Innovation at Edlong Flavor Solutions. We have Gabriela, Alcat, Project Manager at Spanish Food and Drink Federation and panel discussion moderator. Kim Odhner, Managing Partner, Europe and Asia at Unovis Asset Management. Enjoy. Applause, please. Let's welcome our guests.
Good afternoon. Before we get started, maybe just by show of hands, how many people here eat alternative proteins? I mean, animal-based, sort of animal analogs. How many of you are vegetarian or vegan? Okay, interesting. Okay, good. That's helpful. Okay, this morning we've got two industry professionals that we can talk with today to get some insights into our very important topic, which is consumer acceptance, price dynamics in the alternative protein space. Obviously, these two topics are very linked to one another, and we'll dive into it and see what our experts seem to think about the relationship of these two dynamics. Emery, why don't we start with you? Given what we know about the consumer dynamics, what do you think the alternative, the price dynamics, the issues in the price dynamics of alternative proteins are today?
I think it's a very funny topic because you can't have one without the other. As far as I'm concerned, you're not going to get consumer acceptance if the price isn't there. If people can't afford to buy it, they won't eat it. And for me, the way that the market is going, consumer acceptance is very much immersed in taste. And I know I work for a flavor company, so I'm biased. However, I'm also a consumer. And if something looks interesting, I will taste it. If it is not good, I will not eat it again. So in order to get the price dynamic down, or the price dynamic right, you have to have consumers purchasing.
Okay, so I think we understand clearly that as Anne-Marie is coming from a flavor perspective, then probably flavor is going to weigh quite heavily in that discussion. How about you, Gabriela? What are your views on the dynamics that are affecting the space?
Yes, thank you, Kim. Well, I come from the federation in Spain that represents the food industry, so our point of view, of course, is more general, you could say. In Spain, we have been, over the years, increasing our critical areas like digitalization or sustainability, and alternative proteins is one of the areas that we are focusing in. But from the Federation, we work at different projects at the European level with the European Commission. And I feel like we've seen that all the countries are now involved in these new technologies to provide good taste or good sources as an alternative. And I think that every consumer, maybe with me, that price is one of the biggest issues with these new sources, but of course taste, as she was saying. So I feel like consumers should be the first one to change habits, and we should, from the industry, teach consumer to make good choices, and that would change the numbers, maybe.
Okay, thank you. You know, actually, before we came up here, we had a little conversation about the alternative protein space in general. And I guess my question that I've been kind of batting around in my mind for a while now is, why should we care? I mean, who really cares about alternative proteins? And what level of understanding or appreciation do you think that consumers have around this space, and why it's an important area to be developed? You wanna? Which of you would like to take that one on?
I actually think there's not one singular consumer.
Mm-hmm.
The people that are bought into it, like we saw here, it's not necessarily vegetarians and vegans. They've been doing this a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's new entry consumers. So it's people like ourselves who are dipping their toe into flexitarianism, or who are in the supermarket and go, "Ooh, that looks interesting." Then you have another set of consumers that are interested in the planet. So if there's a nice sustainability claim around it, you might get a few of those in. It's not as many consumers as we think that are at that stage yet. And then I think there is the odd flexitarian or vegetarian vegan who is looking for something more nutritious, and convenience plays a role in that, because I did go vegan for a few years and it is extremely hard to stay on top of cooking and prepping everything. So now we have an onslaught of new products on the market that you look at and you go, is it nutritious? Does it taste good? Is there a lot of ingredients in it? Does it meet all of my criteria for purchasing this product? And some do, some don't. Some meet the criteria and then you cook it or you bring it home and it's not as tasty as it should be. And I think consumer acceptance it's very hard. And you need to have every single piece right in order to keep consumers coming back to your product.
Gabriela, I mean, you come from a very meat-intensive country, Spain. And I think it's kind of interesting, as I mentioned earlier, I'm involved with EURA, the Spanish plant-based meat company. And we've developed a pretty healthy market share in Spain. But having said that, I'm really curious, why does the Spanish government care? I mean, why is the industry even looking at this space in a country of such intense meat eaters?
Of course, at the beginning, when change comes, all the industries reject the change because they are very good where they are. But with the time, they realize that these new alternative protein sources, products, are necessary because due to different challenges that we are living, for example, climate change challenges that influence directly in food production, they need to give alternatives to consumers. So the industry has to accept that. And from 5-10 years ago, the industry is now working together with this kind of startups, like you say, for example, EURA is a clear example of that. We also have other examples. We work a lot with the startup environment in our federation. We have like a startup program there. And I can give you, for example, names of other startups that are being success right now. And that is the clear example that Spain is open to this innovation and this market. Of course, we have a big history with meat, as you said, but I think the two main things that we are investing right now is dairy alternatives and meat alternatives. So that is a good representation that we are involved.
I'm curious. From an innovation point of view, I mean, do you think the topic of consumer acceptance and or price dynamics really comes into the discussion to begin with? Or do you think it's something that entrepreneurs consider after the fact as they start to develop products?
I feel some of them, I would say the majority of them, of the startups, they start because they have beliefs in cultural beliefs or for more sustainability changes. They start with their own experiences, but then they realize the market is a hard thing to work against, and they have to collaborate with them. At the beginning, they all started with the slogan to change the world, you know, but now they realize they have to collaborate with the current world, you could say.
Yeah.
And price dynamic is also very important as any other market. Yes.
Okay, I think it's interesting, and for those of you who don't know, flavoring becomes a very, very expensive component in, let's say, plant-based meats, for example. It's a very important inclusionary piece because it actually delivers the flavors that consumers expect, but it's also a very, very expensive ingredient to build into a product like that, typically. And I'm curious, what are some of the interesting innovations that you've been seeing, Anne-Marie, that help with that problem?
So I think there's one key word when we talk about flavor, and Gabriela, you said it, it's collaboration. Mm-hmm. If you are developing a product and you are not thinking and working with flavor companies from the start, you're at a disadvantage. You're also going to cost yourself an awful lot more money. Mm-hmm. So yes, flavor is expensive, but it's expensive because it's put in at the end and it's battling everything. I'll give you a real world example. We've worked on an alternative cheese product, and we worked with the customer from the start, and they were using a protein in it, an alternative or a plant-based protein that was extremely bitter. And in their first iteration, we were like, let's stop a second. Because the bitterness can actually help you target the type of taste you want and bring it more authentic. So instead of us going in at the end and putting flavor on top of it and trying to mask everything, costs you money, then put an actual flavor in it that makes it taste like the product you want, costs you more money, and then bring balance to it and work with your processing, you're just adding cost after cost after cost. But if you stop and think about the ingredients that are in there and getting your balance up front, that bitterness from the protein can be built into the overall profile if it suits. You may have to completely mask it. You may not, though. Sometimes, for example, they were looking to do a Parmesan. There's a bitterness in a Parmesan, but getting the bitterness in the right way is the difference between it being an off note and it being part of the overall taste balance. So for me, the strategy when it comes to flavor is stop and think what it is you're trying to do and think about flavor early on. In terms of innovations, what we found through collaboration, and we do lots of different consortiums and partnerships with ingredients companies, it's even looking before you have your ingredient. So looking at what the farmers are doing, the different types of breeding programs that they have to give you cleaner proteins, then working with the protein. And I don't know how many of you have gone, oh, we've the cleanest protein ever. Somebody tells you that. It's not clean by the time you're finished processing it, putting it into something. It's interacting with your other ingredients. It's working with the fat. It could be working against the fat. Also, too much fat costs you more for flavor. So working and collaborating early on is the biggest strategy you can employ when you're innovating and trying to get consumer acceptance and hit your price targets.
Perfect segue into something else that I wanted to ask, which is, part of this consumer acceptance is really being able to demonstrate to an increasingly skeptical community of potential buyers that these products are healthy. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, from an innovation perspective, do you see anything in Spain where companies are specifically looking at cleaner label products and trying to develop things that actually can be from the outset delivered as a healthier alternative?
Yes. I think that's a key point, and one of the things that we were talking about before is that the consumer has a lack of trust in the food industry regarding to these healthier products or sustainable new products, and of course we are used to the food that we have been eating a long time ago, so it's difficult to change that, and maybe it's not only the new products that we have to focus on, but only the new sources for products that we already know. That is also important. And I feel like a lot of companies, of startups are aware of that, and they are trying to engage the consumer first to then give a new product. So maybe try to replicate the closest thing to the things that they know. It's one of the strategies. Of course, one of the examples that we have in Spain is Vaca. They do alternative cheese. They started with this alternative diet and they realized they cannot give up on cheese. And that was the hardest thing that they could leave out of the diet. So they started with nuts and some fermentation products as other startups, but now they have a differentiative aspect. They started with melon seeds, the milk from the melon seeds, and then fermented that milk. So they discover a new product that melts as cheese does, what we all expect from cheese, that is tasty, which is another important thing. For that they, of course, use some flavoring, and of course that has a brand image, and a powerful brand image. So if you combine those three things, you can engage the consumer, and that's the most important thing, I guess.
Okay, interesting. And how about you, Anne-Marie? I'm sure you get this question a lot of times.
I do. And I suppose I'd start by saying health is subjective. It means something different to everyone. If you are on a low sodium diet, then a product that has too much salt is not healthy for you. Doesn't matter what else is in it. You're only focused on certain claims. And every consumer has their own PowerPoint of what they're looking for on a health claim. So I think with that in mind, if you step it back from the product and think about, well, who's your target consumer? What are you trying to do with your product? Who are you trying to hit? And if you know that clearly before you ever get into the formulation, you have a better chance of achieving what you want, what you've set out to do. In terms of health, I think you cannot be everything to everyone. So you have to pick your battle. So we see in say we'll stick with your cheese alternatives analogy. You want it low sodium, you want it low fat, you want it high protein, you want. Can you actually make that and then still have it melt, taste good? Probably not, and achieve the price point. And yes, there's some wonderful new ingredients coming on the market, great fibers, more soluble proteins, less bitter proteins. But how do you make sure that your product is healthy? Well, you have to know what your consumer's looking for. Are you targeting children? Are you targeting adults that only eat alternatives? Are they comparing it to real cheese? And sometimes healthy isn't just about giving them all these things. If you're trying to set yourself apart from a nutrition perspective, it's what else can you give? For example, I can't remember the cheese name that's out here. They have fiber in their product. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a positive. Therefore, would I incorporate some of that alternative cheese into my diet? Well, yes, if I'm trying to boost my fiber content and have something different. So for me, healthy is so big. We could spend the whole panel talking about each one of the components of this topic, but healthy is a massive one to say that we have the solution. We don't, because it's something different every time.
It's really an interesting one because, you know, so many of the inclusions that people talk about on a ingredient deck, they're synthetic ingredients. So these synthetic ingredients have been created to satisfy certain purposes. And one of the ones that I recently was reading about was vanilla bean, which is it's a flavor that goes into so many different, particularly non-savory products and things like that. But unfortunately, vanilla is sort of an increasingly unavailable ingredient. So to what extent do you think consumers understand the relevance of a synthetic ingredient versus a non-synthetic ingredient? And you and I were talking about this, you know, the encapsulation technology. So I'm just curious. I mean, do you think that is one of the factors that affects consumers' willingness to accept these products?
Of course, always when you generalize, you leave people outside, but I would say the general public, the consumer, the average consumer is not so involved in these new alternative proteins. I mean, we are in the sector, in the food sector, we know about all these techniques, but when I talk to my aunt, to my grandmother, for them it's like the future, and it's already the present. So that is important to understand that for most of the consumers, this is not even happening. So we have the hard work to connect with them, to teach them, and in some little things like, for example, I don't know, date marking. People doesn't understand date marking, and in the industry, we give that like an essential thing, an evident thing also, but consumer doesn't understand that. So we have to start from the beginning and explain to the consumer what is an alternative protein, what are the benefits, of course, what are the challenges, because the price it's also linked to the availability and all the new technical processes. So they have to understand what is implying all this. So this is a hard thing to do. And the example that you were saying, it's a startup called New Caps. Then they do a micro encapsulation of substances. And for example, now they have encapsulated salt, which is like a basic thing to do, but they now realize after 5 years with the technology that these kind of essential things can be very useful, because you can put low salt products in the market, because with a small amount of salt you have a big flavor. So these kind of advances that are simple advances are very important for that.
Yeah, and I suppose even though it might be made out of have natural origins, I mean, at the end of the day, it is synthetic, right? So by definition. We're kind of getting toward the end, and I just feel as though there's one topic I think on the price dynamics that we should probably address, and that is sort of more broadly, people often refer, particularly in the plant-based space, they refer to the fact that industry gets so many advantages as a result of tax concessions or subsidies and things like that. And I'm curious, particularly in Spain, have you seen any initiatives on the part of the government to try and make plant-based foods or alternative proteins a little bit more price competitive with conventional animal proteins?
Well, we work directly with the ministry, so that will be one of the examples. And the ministry finances a lot of projects related to this acceptance from the consumer. And in particular, our contest for startup, but it also finances a lot of other programs to bring these new innovations to the public, to the general public. And we also have a lot of campaigns. I don't remember the exact names right now, but I think you could say the government in Spain is quite involved. It could always be more involved, you know, but of course we are very committed with that. I say we are because we work directly with them, but I feel as a part of it. But it's important that the consumer also wants that product. So for that, it comes the first step, which is teach and do media campaigns and so on.
Thanks. I'm curious, Anne-Marie, you know, on a similar note, not from a regulatory point of view, but I mean from a corporate perspective, to what extent are you under pressure to try and look, or maybe even from some of your customers, to look for more cost-effective ways of delivering flavor? I mean, I assume that's probably a routine question and challenge that you're presented with.
It is, and there's, like anything, there's two sides. So flavor can be the cause of cost, can also be the solution to cost. So we often get a lot of work around, we need to make our product cheaper, but we need to keep it tasting good. What ingredients can we swap in? Can we swap out? Can we take out butter, replace it with vegetable fat? We want to make it more vegan friendly. There's always a way to do it, but it has to be very holistic. You can't just save cost by cutting out something completely. Something else has to go in there to make it cost effective. And the goal is always price parity, which is sometimes driven by industry ourselves because we're doing alternatives to products consumers know. There's a lot to be said for a bit more innovation in the industry to create some more ability to get these products into consumers' hands without having to match the price of cheese. If we continuously call a cheese alternative, you're always trying to chase cheese. But if you come up with new creations, new ideas, new ways of getting things into customers' hands, and it becomes more about taste, experience, ways to use it, incorporate it, cook it, whatever it is, you're no longer under as much pressure to do it. Yes, it has to be affordable, but does it have to be on par with the price of cheese alternative or cheese or meat?
Yeah, you're talking about expanding the categories.
Massive.
And I think that's been a historical problem that we've had over the last, say, 10 years, that the advent of these alternative proteins, and particularly the plant-based proteins. I think the perception is that these are designed to replace the existing category, whereas I think increasingly, hopefully, consumers are understanding that this is it's additional to the existing category. I think maybe we should take a minute and just ask if there's any questions from the audience.
We seem to have one.
Hi, Paul from Bloomberg. Question to Anne-Marie, really. What's the intersect of your world with sustainability? So how much of the flavor solution set what's the interplay with sustainability? And a sort of follow-on question, which is, you know, in the sustainability transition, we talk about the role of consumers, but I'm still quite confused. On the one hand, I think they actually don't care when they're shopping in the supermarket. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I might be attacked after this, but I think sustainability is a word and not everyone is fully on board with it yet. It is bandied around very easily by a lot of companies. There is still a lot of greenwashing, I think. I think consumers are not on the same journey we are at the moment. I think regulations have changed that are driving a lot of change within the industry for us to be more sustainable, to clear things and think about that as we formulate. But consumers aren't there. They're not going into a supermarket and going, well, this is a more sustainable product, so I'll buy it. They're not looking at brands and going, they're more sustainable. They're nice to haves, but they're not the dictator of purchase. And until it is, we're going to have to struggle and build in cost into our own products to deal with the sustainability piece of it. Because we do have to. It's just that it's slower because consumers aren't crying out for it.
Do we have any more? Yeah, we have. So please approach.
Which part of the chain should drive the price dynamics? Should it be the producers, the retailers? What's your view there?
I think as with any kind of product, of course, all the stages have to be regulated. You can start with the production, but you cannot leave out the retail, because if the regulation or the expectations are higher than you can give, then you lose that client. So I feel like all the changes should change at the same time. And for that, for the chain to change, sorry for the wordplay, the consumer has to ask for it. So that's why I was talking more about the consumer during this talk, because the consumer asks for a new product and then all the chain can act towards it.
I would slightly challenge that and say that retailers are a big crux of it, to be honest. They choose what products are in their stores. Therefore, they're choosing what consumers will purchase as a result of it. There's supermarkets in Ireland that only carry the top 2 brands and their own. Your choice is limited by going to them. So I think that retailers drive an awful lot of the price issues back into manufacturers, and it's cutting the bottom line. But I agree, in an ideal world, it's collaborative. It's the whole way through.
I think I would just add to that, and I agree, I think the retailers play a very important role. And if I look in the Netherlands, for example, I think Albert Heijn has increasingly stepped up its game in terms of talking about the importance of alternatives and how they feed into the broader demands that we're facing from a climate perspective. But I do think that regulatory intervention is something that ultimately is going to help to educate people as to why it is we're doing this in the first place. And I think, maybe just the final note for me anyway is that I think unfortunately consumers don't really understand why we're on this journey to begin with. I think the importance of this journey really has a lot to do with where the world will be by, say, 2050. And the difficulty is that most of us, we don't think in terms of where we're going to be 5 years from now. We focus very much on where we are today. And in fact, as I mentioned in Paul earlier, we frequently think from meal to meal. So, we're conscious of these things on a full stomach, but as we start to get hungry again, we look around us and we see, what's most immediate to eat. So I think some of these decisions really are, they're challenging to get consumers to focus on, and I think that's where the role of regulators and the role of education really comes into play. And I think that's ultimately what's going to be essential to changing all of these dynamics and incorporating more alternative proteins into our diets.
Thank you very much, Kim. We have like 30 seconds, so if anyone has an urgent question, now is the time. If not, we should thank our moderator, Kim, and our guests. Thank you so very much for joining us today.